ספר בעל שם טוב עמוד התפילה, אויס קנ"ו. And this is from the Ben Peres Yosef, who is the Toldos Yakov Yosef. It's the same Mechaber. שמעתי בשם מוירה שצורך להספר על סוינוב שהם רוחי של צדיק בגילגול וכולי. וידי התפילה נמתק בשורשו הם מוצאים מהם רוחי, ואני שבהם כל המעלה וכולי דיבר פי חכם חיים. That he heard from his teacher that a man should pray for his enemies. Because when someone is an enemy, that means that there's been entanglement of a soul. There's a piece of your soul in them, and there's a piece of their soul in you. And so he should pray for his enemies because within them is a part of his soul. And then, if his tefillas are niskabel, if his prayer works, and he heals the portions of his soul that are in exile within that enemy, so then, through the prayer, he returns the parts of his soul that belong to him, to his own. His spirit leaves them. Whatever is left in them after cannot hold them up. Why were they the enemies of a righteous person? Because something in them is very not righteous. And so once the spirit of the tzaddik is removed from his enemies, then the enemies have no way to stand anymore. They don't have from where to get life. And so he says, you pray for them because as long as they're your enemies, there's something of you in them. That's why they're obsessed with you. And so now we need to return the sparks to where they belong. All the sparks need to come home. And then the good will be stronger, and the evil will not have from where to take life. So, Ois Kufnun Zayin, Shemati B'Shem Mori, Achispel Al Soinov, the same idea. What else was it? Kisheva Yipol Tzadik V'Kom. Rotzu Loimer, Bezayin Sphiris Nizgalgal Nefesh Ruach Neshama Shaloi. The sparks of the soul have 7 different flavors because a soul has intelligence and it has attributes. Every interaction requires attributes. And so the attributes are not hard to find because we don't interact with them often. The attributes are hard to find because we interact with them so often that there isn't a thought, there isn't a word, there isn't a movement that doesn't come from one of the attributes. What am I trying to accomplish? Who just woke up in me? Who is moving me? And so even if, let's say, my stomach is moving me because I feel hungry, still, my stomach is going to show up in my awareness with some type of an attribute. Is it going to demand, hey, we better get food, or, oh, it would be nice. And so even there's attributes. And then how do I feed my stomach? What attributes do I do then? Am I being practical? Am I just putting gasoline in the machine? Or are there some type of emotions involved in, wow, I'm giving myself life here? When we give to another, we understand that there's an emotion involved. There's a presentation. We're giving to another. But when we give to the body, how are we giving? What's the intention of the giving? What's the emotion? What are the midas? What are the attributes of the giving? And so all the relationships we have with the world are being managed by these attributes. the divine attributes at their core. But then each soul takes it in their own direction and causes it to come out differently. That same attribute. And so like Avraham Avinu, he sees the attribute of kindness as the nature of his soul. And so he keeps on going deeper and deeper into that kindness until he represents these attributes. And the same for Yitzchak with Gvura, and the same for Yakov with Tiferes. They're each putting their soul into a specific type of expression that's a divine expression at its core. But for most people, it falls into the mundane. Their attributes are not what guide their behavior. They have other calculations of why they do what they do, and therefore they are destroying their attributes. In order to get something from the outside world, they are hurting their attributes, and then they're not going to have someone nice dwell in them because they've hurt their attributes. Now they act to people in a certain way because they wanted to make money. But now in their heart, they can no longer come home and dwell in that heart. That heart no longer feels the same way. That heart has learned to be cruel sometimes when it's necessary, of course. But in that world, it's always necessary. And then there are worse places where we can really hurt our attributes. If we have one wrong relationship, we can hurt our attributes. And if our attributes are hurt, who's hurt? Our heart is not getting us. It's getting some other version that it doesn't appreciate. It's a different spirit. It's a strange spirit. And so we have to protect our attributes because they're divine. And from them we receive, not only in this world, in every world we'll go to. Our attributes will come with us. And so he says that the neshama becomes nisgalgal, the nefesh, the ruach, and the neshama become nisgalgal in the 7 spheres. So for example, the nefesh hem avodim v'abehemes shelo. So all the people that he owns represent his level of nefesh. If his nefesh is healthy and he's channeling the right energy, then all the people that work for him and all his animals are going to have a good existence. They're going to feel pretty nice. Because the nefesh that represents them, the nefesh that's in charge, he's the last word on what's going to happen to them. That nefesh, if it's healthy, then everything in that kingdom is healthy. That nefesh is the king. The king, if he's healthy, the entire kingdom is healthy. The king, if he's unhealthy, everything is unhealthy. And so his nefesh is megulgul in these people. These people are sparks of his nefesh because he owns their time. They do what he tells them. And so he owns their nefesh. Nefesh is the ability to live and to accomplish and to become and to manifest. So when they work for him, he owns their nefesh. So their nefesh is really his nefesh. They're gilgul, they're nitzitz of his nefesh that came into another body to serve itself. And so the nefesh is in the ruach, in the avodim of the behemoths. The ruach is the isha. So the wife, the spouse, is going to result in the spirit because this is the most frequent spirit that's going to visit this organism, that's going to become present in this body. The spouse has the most intense relationships because she is the one that he's going to remember the most pleasure with, hopefully, but also the most worry for, also the most complications of if he's going to have a problem with someone's behavior, the closer that person is, the more of a problem it becomes. And so a spouse is what results in the spirit. The spirit of the man will tell us about his spouse. How are his spirits? How does he appear? This depends on what is he thinking about. And so what we think about most is not ourselves, because we have responsibilities that we want to accomplish for ourselves. but the one we think about most is the one that's closest to us, whatever our closest relationship. And so this means that his spirit has a spark in the spouse. That's why they are interacting with each other. If there were no sparks of spirit, there wouldn't be that interaction. And הדיבור, היא גם כן זיוויק שרפני קרישתוי, שם רחמי נזל זוכה איזה לא זוכה כנגדי. So also speech relates to the spirit. When a man speaks, we can know his spirit. When someone's quiet, you can't really know his spirit. You can feel a little bit his vibe, but you can't know exactly what's going on in there. When he speaks, that's when the spirit reveals itself. So דהיינו כשפה גם בדיבור או כמו בלשון הרע וכיוצא מזה נעשה אנושים סוינים המדברים עליו. So when someone speaks evil, so then other people will speak on him evil. It comes around. These spirits that get created, these are all sparks of spirit. He created sparks of spirit, and those sparks of spirit are now speaking through someone else. So הנשמה ממוח והם בנוב. The children represent the soul, and the soul comes from the brain. From there come the tippers that become children, the drops that turn into seed. And so he says the neshama represents the brain. When he has the wrong thoughts, then he has problems with his children, because his children are going to pick up on his thought patterns and he's not going to like them. And so if he doesn't have the right thoughts, he's just going to get a reflection of his own thoughts. That's what they are absorbing. They don't know anything else. They just know whatever the parents tell them. So he'll have problems with the people that he owns, the people that work for him, or his animals, if in his nefesh, if the things that he does are not right. So in all these levels, there is the 7 spheres, there are the 7 midas that are involved in these levels. Also on the level of nefesh, also on the level of ruach, also the level of neshama. In every place, there are 7 different attributes that are being used. 7 different attributes in his relationship with his children. 7 different attributes that formulate the thoughts. This is for the brain. 7 different attributes that are expressed in speech. 7 different attributes that are involved in the relationship with the wife. 7 different attributes for people who work for him and for the animals that he owns. And 7 different attributes for the actions of what's making him act and do. And so in each place you have all these levels, and these are all sparks of nefesh, ruach, and neshama that are coming out. And so wherever the problem is, that's where he'll see things appear in the world to show him his sparks, to give him a mirror of what he needs to do. נמצא סיינף שבו ידי בגם הדיבר צריך לסקלם ללסם ידי דיבר התפילה. אם לאו שדויכו יסנעשה יוסי סיינם על ידי אביס וחומריס. לכן גם עונש לצדיק לא יטוב כי רוחו של צדיק עצמי. It says over here that all the spheres are easier to save sparks from than the malchus itself. Where's the malchus of the spheres? The malchus of the spheres is what actually happens. And so with the spheres, it's easier to correct the attributes. The attributes are within us, so we can correct them much more easily. But the malchus, which is the manifested part, so let's say if someone spoke inaccurately, and so this attribute that caused them to speak inaccurately, that's going to be easier for him to fix than the fact that he already did that and whatever the consequences are for that. And so that's the malchus. And there's something called klipas noiga. Klipas noiga is the nature of the animal that we're riding on. The nature that she has without any oversight from a spiritual side, assuming that it was just allowed to be its animal self and didn't have to answer to any higher, deeper intelligence. So that's sort of a crossover between an animal and a human. It's not really human. It doesn't really understand the subtle side of reality. It only understands the basic side, the sensual side of reality. And so that klipas noiga, that nature resists what's happening when it happens wrong. It's hard to negotiate with her and say, oh, this is what needed to happen. Don't make now a big deal. She makes a big deal because this is her nature. It takes time to refine her. So these are the sparks that are the hardest to refine. The sparks that relate to actual manifestations. And then the reactions, the natural reactions we have to that. That over there, a lot of sparks of soul get stuck. And they not fast enough can we get them out of there before they get forgotten. And then they're going to have to be recycled and come up again so that we can actually realize what really should have happened. Always what happens, we're going to have to make peace with at some point. The bigger the event, the longer it takes. But all the sparks that are busy with processing the event are not yet here. They're not with us. The soul is not present. And so there's different events in life that take time. People know ahead of time. This is going to take a soul to absorb a lengthy amount of time, many months, before it can feel itself again. Because this was a big event. This was something that requires an update for the entire system. All the parts that are involved in processing this are not available to be you. And they need their time in order to do this process. So the Malchus, he says, because it's yoinik from the klipas noiga, so it's harder for her from there to take out the nitzotzes of his nefesh, ruach, and neshama. So then he says, nimtzo, soin of shebol yidei pegam adiber, if he has enemies that came because he misspoke, tzorich lesaklem lanoisem vayidei dibur atfila, then he prays for them. If he says, no, I don't need to pray for them, they become more difficult for him, because the more he alienates these exiled sparks, the more they're going to bother him. They belong to him. At the end, they're going to come home. They're not going to forget. You're going to try to distract yourself, they're going to come knocking. You're going to go there, they're going to knock there. You have to get them back. They're yours. And so the sooner he can give them a tikkun and bring them home, the faster he's going to get out of this entanglement. So it's not good that the tzaddik should punish, because if the tzaddik punishes, then his sparks get more entangled. This is the sparks of his own spirit. He gets his sparks back through prayer, because whatever din there was, whatever anger there was that resulted in the soul obsessing over something has now been relieved, and the soul returns to her place. The din was nimtak b'shorsha. The tightness, whatever resulted in this bondage, was melted at the root. It no longer exists. And then whatever is left is just, it gets lost. So from this we can understand a way of interpreting what's taking place in a life. So this was the one thing that caused Moshe Rabbeinu to get to the level of prophecy that he did, which is he corrected his speech. He spoke very accurately. This was all that was necessary. But to speak accurately, you have to get to know the attributes. You have to get to know the organs. You have to get to know what is trying to speak in me so that I can speak it accurately. And so this includes the entire wisdom of being human. But if we are silent, we're intuitive, then we already get closer. He got very close. He went all the way through the fire in order to find what's behind it. But everyone can get closer than they are. And it starts by really being careful with our speech, by really being observant of the words that come out of our mouth and how it makes us feel, how we understand the purpose of what they're trying to accomplish. And if we can say it in less words, or if we can say it in more accurate words, or all this relates to the soul being able to express itself to you. The practice that you get from expressing yourself to people is an extra benefit, that you learn also how to communicate with others. But really the training of the faculty of speech is so that the soul can reveal itself to you. And the soul needs tremendous intelligence, and the soul needs emotional capacity, that we should be able to carry the burden of the truth. The truth is very big. It's big in a good way because there's infinite good that awaits, and it's big in a difficult way because we have created a big mess that we're going to have to climb out from under before we're going to get to that infinite good. And so it's a heavy burden for a human being to carry. It's an emotional burden. We need the emotional capacity to carry it before we can reveal that truth to the soul. And so Moshe Rabbeinu, he faced that truth completely. He went all the way to the beginning, to the origin of that truth in order to know it for us, so that we can know it. And he suffered so many challenges because he didn't get cooperation. He was doing everything for them. He already gave up on his personal existence because he realized that something greater is at stake. He realized that the fact that the people are suffering is God crying for help. That's what human suffering means. It's like, I gave you control and you're not doing it right. And so he went to listen, and he heard, and then he tried to give over the message. And the message was not received. If the message were received, it would be over. The message was not received, the people were not ready for the message. And so there was an alternative message. And this alternative message is, again, created by the power of speech, but it's not the same speech. The original message was the divine speech. The divine speech where one knows how to open their heart and they can directly experience what is being told. But the second luchos that we received after the Egel, that speech is a speech that's telling you about something that you cannot experience. It's telling you about someone else's experience. And so that's because we weren't ready for the original speech. The message was there. The message was to take us all the way. But the people were not there. And so he perfected his speech. This is what he did for us, for humanity. He perfected his speech in order to try to deliver a remedy for the spirit, to heal the soul, the collective soul of humanity. The soul was neglected by the nations. The nations were more concerned with their individual strength. They were competing for strength. They were competing for power. They were competing for land. And they had neglected the soul. And Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to heal the soul. And so he perfected his speech. And so at first, he was working with the sheep, and later these sheep became sparks of soul, inspired sparks of soul. They came back as humans to learn from him. And the same is about the sheep that were with Yakov Avinu. Yakov Avinu's sheep became Klal Yisrael later. The relationship that we have with animals is not only in this world. This is a much deeper relationship because animals are sparks. They're all sparks of the greater soul. We are all sparks of the greater soul. And so when an animal has a relationship with a human, that results in a relationship that lasts beyond that lifetime. And here we see children and grandchildren being part of that relationship by Yaakov, and students being part of that relationship by Moshe. So they came back and he gave them the Torah and he taught them his wisdom. It's from the Pen Paris Yosef again. From the Torah Yaakov Yosef, Shemati Mimori, כי נפש רוח נשמה של אדם נסגלגל בזין ספירס והנפש הם עבודה ובמויסב. ואם פה גם בנפש דהיינה במייסה, גורם לצער מעבודה ובמויסב, ורוח ממלא לו הדיבור. ואם פה גם בדיבור לשון הרע, כיוצא בזה נעשה מדיבור זה אנשים שמצער נעשה מדברים עליו. ונודע כי הדיבור נקרא זיווה, כמו שאמר חכמינו ז"ל, ראי מדברס. אם כן אשתו היא רוח, גם כן זוכה נעשה לעזר אם לאו כנגדם. And so this is the same idea as we just learned, that the sparks of Nefesh Ruach Neshama go into Gilgul, go into incarnations that become the things around us, that become the spirits around us, that become the spirits that react to us. And so it's not conscious. When I speak to someone, there is a conscious exchange. I speak to him, he speaks to me, based on what I just told him. But then, in addition, there was a spirit created. This spirit is going to come back to me from other places also. Someone's going to tell me something based on spirit. The spirit that I said. This is why it says, Ki oif hashamayim yoleches hakol. The birds that fly in the skies, they will transfer the sound. So that's why a person, even, it says, even when you're alone in a room, you shouldn't curse the king. Why? Nobody can hear you. But the spirit has been created, and kings don't like to be cursed. So now there's a spirit that says, you did something, and there's a king that doesn't like that something. And so this has its own power. The spirits, they come back to us in different ways that we don't even recognize. This is why when we create, we want to create with the right attributes. If we create with the right attributes, the spirits that will come back to us will be favorable. If we create with the wrong attributes, the spirits are already against us. They're going to get us if we don't return. So all these spirits are going to be visible when we leave. We're going to see, oh, wow, we created a whole army. And that army is there either to make it more and more wonderful or whatever attributes they have. And so he says that the Nefesh Ruach Neshama go into these attributes, and then they show up in your servants and in your animals. This is from the Nefesh, which is the Olam HaMaaseh. And if he does things that offend the nature of reality, then this causes him suffering from his servants, or for the people who serve him, and from his animals. And the speech represents spirit, and so if he speaks evil speech, so then people will speak and cause him harm. And it's known, he says, V'noida, ki hadibar nikra zivug, that speech is like unification. when a husband and a wife are together, it's a type of speech, because it's a form of communication. And so, im kein ishto yiruach, gam ken zochanas le'ezim lav kenegde. So just like a woman, it says, if he has the merit, she becomes a helper. And if he doesn't have the merit, she becomes an obstacle. And so the same thing happens for speech. Speech, if he speaks with merit, then it becomes a helper. If he speaks without merit, it becomes an obstacle. So ishto yiruach gam ken v'neshama yishachenes b'marech, the soul, the neshama resides in the brain. Shemizeh nasa tipizarish, from there comes the drop of the seed. V'em banav, this represents the children. V'im pogam b'machshava shebemoyach gerim sheyesh l'tzar mibanav. If he somehow offended by thought, then his children bring him discomfort. From all the spheres, it's easier to elevate these sparks. From the malchus, same like you said before, that because in the manifested reality we have reactions and we have a way of how our soul responds to reality. So from that sphere, it's the hardest to elevate the sparks. So kosher lahalis misham nefesh ruach neshama sheloi klal le'oile kin ve'odem asoy nemoisoy bol tebigam debil lechain tzarich la'los n'sakin da'divrei tefillah l'spal le'en she'yeshiv yisikni. So again, those who are against him, his enemies, he needs to pray for them, so that the words of prayer will heal the words of evil. K'mo she'omrim b'shas gam Rabbi Meir b'Ruria, Itzay yitamu chatoim v'lo yitamu choitim. I said, our prayer is that sin should leave the world. The sinners are okay as soon as they stop sinning. But the problem is not the person. Oh, this person, no. The problem is not the person. The problem is the way they behave, the things they do. If they stop behaving that way, if they stop doing it, then we're good. And so pray that they should stop being that way. Don't pray that something bad should happen to them. Pray that they should heal from their spiritual disease. And then you can get your sparks back. He doesn't do it this way. They become even more of a problem. That a tzaddik, even if there's punishment, it's not good for him. He doesn't appreciate it. Because these are his sparks of spirit that he needs to return to himself. And this he does through prayer. Through prayer he sweetens the root, meaning he returns the sparks from the original place from where they were taken. He realizes where he went wrong. He realizes what he got caught up in, and then he gets his sparks back. Whatever is left ends in there on its own. This is what it says about Moshe. So Moshe was misaken his nefesh. How did he do that? By observing his actions and being very clean in his behavior. And through that, all the sheep that he was interacting with became of a different quality. And then they came back as people. And then he taught them wisdom. And this was the Dardeya. This was the wisest generation that ever lived, according to some. There's different understandings of the wisest. The Derech of Shlomo, Derech of Cheskel. But one thing they all agree on is that Derech of Mashiach is going to be the wisest of all the generations before. Because we've been developing our capacity with speech. We've just been using speech in a very clumsy way. The speech that we're accumulating is really not useful. It's even toxic. But yet, we've developed a brain that's capable of processing a lot of speech. And so when that speech is going to start becoming valuable, when those spirits are going to start working in our favor, then this generation is going to be the most advanced from all the generations before, the most knowledge, the most wisdom, the most appreciation for what is happening here. And this is why they're going to experience the redemption. The redemption is experienced when the brain is so excited about existing that it just floods the body with chemicals of happiness and joy. And then there's a different level of soul that can come in. The soul can't come in when we're sad. And so when there is the proper conditions, the soul appears within the body, and then that intelligence of the soul, this is the intelligence of Adam Rishon before the Chet. There's not a person that has gotten to that ever since. And so this generation that's going to be liberated is going to be liberated with such an extent of happiness, such a deep joy, such an overwhelming bliss, that all the pain are going to seem like a distant memory. It's going to be like a dream. Like what? To be a human was uncomfortable? How could it possibly be? What, humans didn't know how to cooperate and make themselves feel better? What was wrong with them? What were they busy doing? Where were they spending their days? We won't be able to understand. And it's not understandable. To understand it, you need this brain. Only this brain with this amount of clutter, with all these years of suffering and all these confusions and misunderstandings, that's what it looks like after all that goes into the brain. If you remove that from the brain cannot understand that. The brain cannot imagine it. It doesn't make any sense. It's only when you're in it that it's like, this is the only way I can do it. I'm stuck in this. Where can I go? And so as soon as we're going to be out, like what? For real? You're going to read the old newspapers. We're not going to be sure if they were writing the news or this was just some entertaining fiction. It's Kuf Nun Tes. This is from the Ksonius Pasim. This is again another one from the Toldos. Shemati mimoyre sheikshar Ramban v'kosev beperik hayde broches zichre b'shem Rav Chazdo b'chulu b'inyan tefillah shenishtanek zardin al dei tefillah mirol l'toiva. He says, how could it be that prayer will change a decree from bad to good? He knows everything. He already took into consideration all the different facts. And he came to a conclusion and he made a decree. So now we're praying and he changed his mind. What happened over there? He doesn't want what he wanted before? What was new by the fact that there was a prayer? What changed? If this is what's best for the situation, so be it. If it's not what's best for the situation, then why did we decree it in the first place? So what changed over here through prayer? So Bishlem says, if you say the person was praying for himself, and therefore the prayer shows that he realized his mistake, or that he is more serious now, or you say there's a change in the person, and therefore the prayer changes the decree. Okay, there's still a way to say. But we know that a person could pray for another person. And when a person prays for another person, the one that has the decree, he didn't change anything, he's still the same guy. And now suddenly what Hashem wants about him changed? How did this happen? So it says, if he's praying for himself, because this person became better, also his decree became better. If the other people are praying for him, then what changed? So what does prayer do? Prayer unites creation with the Creator. Prayer means, I know that there are attributes that are interacting with me that belong to the one that designed. And I know that I can interact with them, I can speak with them, I can express my heart, and it means something to these attributes. Something will change as a result. The spirit that I create will have an impact in all the worlds. It will have an impact in what will take place on this planet. This is the belief. Otherwise, why are you praying? And so when one prays, this is the reality that he wakes up. And so he's uniting the Malchus, the Shekhinah, the manifested reality, what actually takes place. He's uniting that with the Bina, with the level of understanding that he understands now that how he interacts with it is what's going to result in the future. His interaction is instrumental to creating the right future. This is what Tefillah is demonstrating. Otherwise, what are you getting involved in God's business? Just let him do what he needs to do. But no, he wants me to get involved because my understanding, the way that I activate my attributes, this is what results in what's going to happen. Somehow this influences what happens on this planet. The way that I interact with my attributes, I am manifesting how the higher force is going to interact with this planet. Not just with me, with everyone here. I'm bringing in this energy, this interpretation, this truth, this reality. It's real because I'm alive. That's why it's real. If I wasn't alive, it wouldn't be real right now. It's in the middle. It's somewhere between the truth and the lies, and this is my place. Only I hold this place. Some people are much deeper in the lie, and some people might be deeper in the truth. This is true here because this is the spirit that's alive now. And so he says, when you pray, you're coming to be sweetening the judgments within the Malchus, within the manifested reality, within the actual soul that's living. B'shar bina, in the root which is bina, which is the mother. V'kashim espel avu chaveiroi, b'zeh oifum az mekasher oisel lemala b'shorish v'od amacher, lo zeh rishon. So he says, when he does this unification for his friend, when he does this prayer for his friend is no longer the same guy. The whole world just changed. There's a new introduction of an attribute. This attribute doesn't think the way the previous attribute thought, and now there's a new relationship between creator and creation. In this relationship, anything is possible. And so when one does prayer, it's like he's asking for a whole new set of instructions for reality, because a new attribute has been involved in how creator is seeing creation. And now all of reality is going to run more according to that attribute. And so now there's a chance for the decree to change, because there's a different guy, a different world, a different relationship. Everything is new based on the new attributes. Then he explained further that the Gzardin he tippel berechem amalchus. The oisis, k'ma shamru b'shas, yidei b'tzal tzar avosei shnei shem b'shmayim v'aretz. Evavada en hamelech oisa din, en hamelech atzma oisa din b'acherim, kim shemitzav l'shliach al yidei tevis hatzirif, hamashmiya mag gezeire gozer olav. And so he says the way that the Gzeira gets delivered works through letters. The letters create a word, and the word gets manifested by the angel. And so this word that has specific letters, there is still room to change the order of these letters. The din that's coming out, there's still room, the one that's getting the message, if there's the involvement of a human intellect, he can change the order of these letters as they're coming out. So ויוכל השליח לעשות בראש הטבע של הגזיר שגוזר באופן דמשמע בעניין אחר. והנה הצדיק שליח דמתניס הידע למעשה כדינם בשוש נקש הטיפו של מלכוס אל הבינה ונשתן לנחר ואוב מדיב לפי חוכם חיים. So he says, the tzaddik, what's his work? What does he do in his prayer? He wakes up the connection between the lower world and the higher world. When he wakes up that connection, these forces that are already on the way can change their order. He can make a new tziruf. If he makes a new tziruf, then he gets a new reality. It's a different manifestation. It's a different truth that comes out. And this relates to the letters that are mentioned the Sefer Yetzirah because everything that happens in this world happens through the letters. The letters represent the forces that are creating the astrological zodiac and the elements with which they build. And so all was created through these elements. That's why they're called mazoles. Mazoles means milashon nozel, that it flows down. It flows down from them a vibration, and that vibration creates within the elements. And the elements can become so activated by these vibrations until you see them sitting here and talking to you. They have a whole story. All this was just from the activation of the elements through the mazoles, through the stars that are vibrating within the elements. And within that vibration, they vibrate to such a degree, they come together to such a degree, they come to life to such a degree, until eventually this is going to be a seat for a higher intelligence. Who is that higher intelligence? The one that understands how this works. He's going to be able to dwell within this dwelling created by the kechavim and the mazoles, and he's going to be able to dwell in this dwelling when this dwelling is going to be developed enough, activated enough, sensitive enough, tuned in enough to all the subtle frequencies and all the subtle vibrations, and then it's going to have enough intelligence to be itself for the first time. Hasn't happened yet. And so we're in the middle of this process where the planets are working together, the stars are working together, and activating the elements one after the other, more and more sensitivities, more and more complexity, more and more tuning in to subtle vibrations until the human can be human and the divine spirit can dwell permanently, not as something that comes and goes, but as the owner of the place that's always there. Whenever you speak to a human, you're going to speak to a divine spirit, to the Holy Spirit. There's not going to be any human that's carrying any other spirit. Any other spirit is a form of a disease. But what that Holy Spirit has access to is going to be different for each individual. And it's going to depend on what happened before the great event of the awakening. Based on that, each one will have access to different sensitivities. Based on the relationships that were created with the attributes, the evolution of that soul is going to proceed. And so when something comes out from above, those who have the right sensitivities, they can still change how it will come out through these letters. These letters that are all there is to know. If we know these letters and we know the 10 spheres, then we know the heart, then we know how the system works. But to know it, we have to be silent enough to see them operate. And this is quite a challenge, because humanity has been spinning faster and faster and faster and faster and faster and faster, and to see this, we have to literally stop. What's left is the silence, is the space within which these forces operate. Those who are there, they can observe these forces operate, they can get to know them better. No one knew them. They're not knowable because they're creating us. So even the parts that we use to know them are them. But there are many different levels of how close were they, how much did they engage, and also which of them were more developed, which of them were less developed. Like we said, Avraham Avinu was Midas HaChesed, meaning you want to know Chesed, Avraham Avinu is the expert on Chesed. In the other Midas, Avraham Avinu is bigger than anyone that we know, and yet not the same as Yitzchak, for example, in Gvura and like that. And so Avraham Avinu showed his Gvura by the Akedah. And Chesed needs to demonstrate Gevurah, otherwise it can't exist. If Chesed doesn't have any boundaries, then it cannot exist. It will cease. And so Avraham Avinu has Gevurah, but not like Yitzchak has Gevurah. Yitzchak has Chesed, but not like Avraham has Chesed. And like that. And so within us, different people are activated in different ways. But knowing these forces that are operating is at the root at knowing how this world operates. There's no other way of knowing it. It's not something that we can read in a text. It's not logical. It's not something that we can discover through any other method other than by ourselves being silent and being able to observe what these really are. How do you even approach these things? And so this is called Maaseh Merkava, and it says you don't give it over only to a Yochid, and you tell him the Rosh Prakim, and he has to be a Chocham Amevin Midata. He has to be a wise man who can understand from his own perception. Otherwise, giving him the pointers is not going to help. He doesn't have a clean perception. He will not be able to see. And so these letters are the nature of reality, and this is why the astrologers would try to figure out what's going to happen based on these elements and how they're activating the planet. And Avraham Avinu was taken beyond them and said, you connected the intelligence that made all of these. You belong there because you have perception. And your perception is the most complex perception that exists in the entire universe. Angels can know much more than us. Angels are much bigger than us. But their perception is not complex. Their perception is fixed. A human's perception is the most complex perception that exists. And it was designed specifically to know these letters, to know, this is your wisdom and understanding in the eyes of the other nations, is that you know how reality formulates and you know how to interact with it, with attributes that are going to enhance life and not cause damage to life. שמעתי בשם מורי פיר שהפוסק רצון יראה ויעשה ושבוסם ישמע ויושיעם. He does the will of those who fear him, and he listens to their cry, and he saves them. If he did their will, then why does he have to hear their cry? When you hear their cry, it means something in their will must have gotten violated, right? And so Ritzon Yireh V'Yaseh, V'Shavosam Yishma V'Yishim. Why are they in a matzav of Shavosam? Shavosam means that they're crying out. If it was already Ritzon Yireh V'Yaseh, he already did what they wanted. So what's going on over here? First, he should have said the opposite. He could have said, he listens to their cry and he does their will. Meaning, yeah, something was not like their will, then they cried, and then he did it. But here he says the opposite. He says, first he does their will, and then he listens to their cry. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu listens to all the prayers. And this is why every dibur has ashpah. Every dibur does something. So it might not do exactly what the person is trying to do, but it's going to have an effect on reality in some way. And so it's like he listens to every prayer. And sometimes people will pray in situations where it would be better that they don't get what they want. And yet, if they do it with the right emotion, they will get what they want. So, even a thief that's in a tunnel trying to get away with his loot, he is also praying that he shouldn't get caught. And so he is asking for something while he is violating the collective. And he's asking from the collective to save him. And yet, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the attributes, the way that they were designed is that if he's crying out with compassion, it will probably get him saved. Because it's the heart that's going to send the message, and it's going to result where it lands in the bigger soul. And so if it's directed with the right attribute, it's going to go by its nature. Then there might be other things there are other protective mechanisms that might get involved. But by its nature, when one cries out with compassion, then it arrives. What's the difference between the righteous and the not righteous? If all we're looking at is the attribute. And so what difference does it make if one is righteous or not? He said there's a big difference. He says, at that point his prayers are still being answered while he's doing the thievery. When he gets caught, so he says he has to choose what he wants to pray for, because you can't pray and get everything you want. But if you pray out of emotion, it might have an impact. So let's say this person, he says, I want to succeed when I'm stealing. And so he prayed that with deep emotion and he got what he wanted. But then he gets caught. And then he cries and he cries, but it doesn't help anymore. And so here, because he chose that prayer, it went in, but it wasn't necessarily good for him. When the righteous, when the righteous man prays, so he says, by the thief, because he's not a kind man, so then HaKadosh Baruch Hu listened to him when he asked, but at the end, when it went bad, he didn't listen to him anymore. But the righteous, if he asks, even though he knows it's not good for him, he'll give it to him. So he says, then he prays, the righteous one prayed, and it was wrong, and he got what he wanted. So then he prays again and says, save me from what I asked. He gets answered then also. And so that's the difference between the righteous and the not righteous. So he says, Ritzon Yirev Yaseh. For the righteous, he does what they want, number one. Number two, when they didn't know what to want, and therefore it goes bad, he listens to their cry also. So it says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Halavai they would leave me, but at least they should keep my teachings. And so what type of resolution is that? Why would you want to leave you and to keep teachings? If you can have one of the two, it would be better they don't leave you. So he says, Hashem, everybody takes him along everywhere. Even the Ganav, while he's stealing, he's asking Hashem. So that Hashem, he takes with him even when he's going in the opposite direction. But if it would be Teros Shemori, if he would say, okay, I'm not with Hashem, but if I'm going to keep the teachings, then the teachings will tell me that I shouldn't steal. And so Ozvi, to leave me, okay, even if they hold on to me, they can still do all the wrong and hold on to me. And so no, they should understand my teachings. What do my teachings say? That if you offend the attributes, things are not going to be right. We're not going to have access to him if the attributes are going to be offended. So why would HaKadosh Baruch Hu listen to him if he's praying to steal? So he says, you have to let a person who wants to do evil, otherwise there wouldn't be any test, there wouldn't be any room for a demonstration of the soul. If the soul wants to demonstrate that it's not evil, then there needs to be an option of doing evil. And so this person is just using that option, and through prayer is getting what he wants. Prayer is one of the ways that you can do ishtadlus. You can create spirits that are going to help you. And so he's using the powers available to him to manifest his reality. Nobody's going to get in his way. It says, he sees that you can pray, he sees that prayer works, so then he sees that someone is involved. There's someone that you can turn to. Oh, if there's someone you can turn to, maybe now he will stop with being a thief and he will go back to being straight. Because the proof of him getting what he wants shows him that there's also who to fear, because he just saw what you did. He even helped you. So now you better return to him before things get complicated. It says he's listening to you in order to do something bad to another person. If you're going to pray for something good, then much more so that he's going to listen. So it says here, you see that the fact that he thinks that he is with Hashem is giving him some type of a support to do what he wants to do. And so therefore, if he would keep the Torah, we would be better off. If they left me, they shouldn't lean on me in order to do something that's against the attributes, and to lean on me that I will save them. And so he says this enables them, the fact that they have the ability to pray and get answered for things that are not straight, enables them to go against the ultimate good. And so it would be better if they would chase the wisdom than if they just chase me and they say, oh, help me, help me, help me. חצי זעם וחצי נחמה, מה שאין כן ירמיה. והנה נשייה מהנובי שהושלך בבור וקרא ציבוי על שלא יספר לישראל כשנאמר לנבואה. And so he says that Yirmiyahu Hanavi, he received a bitter message to give over to Klal Yisrael. And he was expected to pray. He was expected to awaken his attributes so that something changes, and he didn't do that. And so what ended up happening is that the people threw him into a pit, and he was kept there for a while, and he went through a lot of difficult times because he was the one that was supposed to defend the people from the tragedy that was coming, or at least soften it, or at least help them in some way, and he didn't do that. And so thoughts are like dreams. And dreams, they don't have an intrinsic meaning. Whatever you think it means, that's what it's going to become. And so also thoughts are like dreams in that sense, that they go after the path. If I interpret the thought to mean this, then that's what it means. Who's going to get in my way? And so that's why I said before, he said, Sur merav asay tov. Sur merav asay tov means every thought, interpret it to something good. Don't allow bad interpretations to gain a foothold in your thought process, because then they build on themselves. And so every thought, interpret it to good. Sur merav asay tov. So מחשבתם כמו החלום שהולכן אחר הפה, אם הוא מאמין, ועל כן יוכל לספר להמתיק בשער שם. And so whatever he believes and he says, this is what becomes the reality. And so through prayer, he could change, he could remove any din, he could remove all the negative decrees. כי נצח והוד שמו הגזר דין, ואין יוכל להמתיק נאמר בעל פה, ואין לכל זוי. Oh, he's not telling us the secret. וגם איך שהמחשב יהיה החלום ובסוף העולם, ובזה יהיה מפסק הנ"ל, עד סמרה ועשה טוב ידי פי חוכם חיים. So I think what he's hiding here is that from Netzach V'Hod, where the Gzar Din gets written, it goes to the Yesod, which is the Tzaddik. It goes to whoever represents that in that generation. And through that, he has to agree, and then it gets to the Malchus. Then it becomes a decree that goes to the Shechina. And so Yirmiyah Hanavi represented the tzaddik at that time. And so the Netzach V'Hoid created a decree, and it came to the Yesod, which was Yirmiyah Hanavi. And so if Yirmiyah Hanavi would have prayed, he would have gone back to another interpretation from the Bina, and then the Netzach V'Hoid would have created a new decree. And so instead of releasing the decree, he should have held back the decree and sent it back to the Bina to be reworked through his prayer. And because he didn't do that, so it ended up that he went through challenges as a result. וגם איפה שהמחשבה או החלום היא בסוף העולם, it says it could also be that the thought or the dream is in the other end of the world. And so whenever he creates a new interpretation, he needs to be aware of his attributes. Sumerav asay tov. Don't allow the difficult attributes to interpret situations, because then you're stuck with them. Then they're going to be there until you process this situation. So the more you're giving your situations to being processed in the kind attributes, the more easy the processing is going to take place. The more difficult attributes get involved, the longer it's going to take to process. And so sur merav asay tov. In every situation, try to minimize the bad, minimize the resistance, minimize the levels of difficulty, v'asay tov, and make it good. Interpret to the good, make it easy. One more. קוף סמך בייז. שמעתי מורי ז"ל, כשנזדם לאודם איזה צורך ויספל וניצול, גם כשנזדם לעוד סיבה זה לא יהיה צורך וכולי ודיר פי חוכם חיים. So if a person has an obstacle, a difficulty, and he prays, and the prayer comes through, he gets saved. So he says, he now removed an obstacle in the spiritual world. And so now, there might be that this problem would have come again. It could be that all the circumstances are there, that this problem should come again. But now it won't come again. Because the angel that was making this problem has already been resolved. The prayer already took away the power of this problem, and so this problem will no longer appear, even in the future. So may all our problems go that way, and may we see what comes after the problems, how it feels to be us without problems. And then we'll just rejoice and feel grateful. This is what we were designed for. May it happen now.